What if the loudest statement someone can make is saying nothing at all? And why is Jill Dillard choosing silence now, after years of speaking out? There was a time when Jill was the one breaking ranks. The one willing to say what others wouldn't. She went from being part of a tightly controlled reality TV world to someone openly questioning it. And for a while, it felt like she was becoming the clearest voice from inside that system. But lately, something has shifted. She's quieter, more private, more selective about what she shares. And that change isn't random. It tells a deeper story. To understand it, you have to go back to where all of this started. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Let's grab a cup of tea and take a deep dive into the full details. I hope you stay with me until the very end. Jill grew up in a very public environment. Her life was documented through shows like, and later. Every milestone, every belief, every family dynamic was part of a larger story that millions of people watched. But behind that image, there were strict rules, clear expectations, and a strong authority structure led by her father. For years, Jill followed that structure. Then, things began to change. One of the biggest turning points came when Jill and her husband started creating distance from the family's control. They spoke about financial disagreements tied to the show. They talked about boundaries. They made it clear that their experience behind the scenes wasn't as simple as it looked on TV. And eventually, Jill shared even more through interviews and her book. That was a major shift. And this is where it matters. Speaking out in a family like that isn't just personal. It changes the entire dynamic. It challenges authority. It reshapes relationships. At that point, Jill became, in many ways, a whistleblower in the public eye. People looked to her for insight, for truth, for updates. But here's the thing. Recently, that voice has softened. Not disappeared, but changed. She's no longer consistently commenting on family drama. She's not engaging publicly in the same way. And she's clearly choosing what to share, and what to keep private. This is where the idea of the divide becomes very real. On one side, you have the core Duggar family structure. Still largely private. Still operating within its own set of values. On the other side, you have Jill. Living a life that feels more independent. More modern. More removed. And between those two sides, there's distance. Not just physical distance, but emotional and relational distance too. One of the clearest signs of this is her absence from certain family events. Over time, people have noticed she's not always present, not always included, or possibly choosing not to attend. And that says something deeper. Family events are usually where unity is visible. So when someone is consistently absent, it signals that something underneath is still unresolved. Either boundaries are being enforced, or relationships are still healing. Another shift is where Jill is putting her energy. Instead of focusing outward, she seems focused inward. On her kids, on her marriage, on building her own version of family life. And that feels intentional, because attention is limited. Where someone places their focus tells you what matters most to them in that moment. And right now, it looks like Jill values stability over visibility. That's interesting, because in the past, visibility was part of her role. Her identity was tied to being seen, being known, being part of a public story. Now, she's stepping away from that. And then there's something else, the idea of legal walls. Over time, Jill has referenced boundaries in very specific ways. Not just emotional boundaries, but structured ones. Agreements, limitations, clear lines. She's been careful with how she talks about it. She doesn't overshare. She doesn't go into unnecessary detail. And that restraint feels very intentional. And this is where it gets interesting. Boundaries only work when they're maintained. And sometimes, silence is part of that. Not everything needs to be explained publicly, to be real. A lot of people misunderstand her silence. It's easy to assume it means retreat, or fear, or pressure. But it could also mean control. It could mean she's no longer reacting. She's choosing. And that's a very different place to be. What stands out here is the contrast. Before, there was a need to explain, to clarify, to tell her side. Now, there's a sense of calm distance. She's still online, still sharing parts of her life. But it's filtered, intentional, controlled. And that shift is significant. Then there's the public reaction. People are divided. Some feel disappointed. They want more updates, more insight, more clarity. Others are supportive. They see growth, healing, someone protecting their peace. And this matters, because public figures are often pulled in two directions. There's audience expectation, and then there's personal well-being. And those two don't always align. What Jill seems to be doing is choosing long-term stability over short-term attention. And that's not easy, especially when your life has been public for so long. Another layer to this is how the rest of the family responds. Most of the Duggar family stays relatively quiet about internal conflict. They present a unified front, even when things may be complicated behind the scenes. So when Jill steps back, it doesn't create loud conflict. Instead, it creates space. And that space feels like a divide. Not explosive, but very real. Not all divisions are dramatic. Some are quiet, gradual, defined by absence, rather than confrontation. And this feels like one of those cases. So the question becomes, is this silence temporary, or is this the new normal? Because if it's intentional, if this is her long-term approach, then it suggests something deeper. It suggests she's no longer trying to change the system she came from. She's simply choosing to live outside of it. And that's a powerful shift. But what stands out even more is how subtle this transformation has been. There wasn't one single moment. It happened slowly, step by step, boundary by boundary. Until now, the difference is clear. And maybe the most important part of this story is not what Jill is saying, but what she's choosing not to say. Because sometimes, silence isn't avoidance. It's resolution. And honestly, this might be the most grounded version of her we've seen. Not because everything is perfect, but because she seems more in control of her own story. At the end of the day, this divide isn't just about conflict. It's about identity. It's about where someone chooses to stand after stepping away from everything they once knew. And right now, Jill Dillard seems to be standing in a place that prioritizes peace. Even if that means saying less. Even if that means being misunderstood. Because maybe the real story isn't about what she left behind. It's about what she's protecting now. Let me know what you think. down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. Now, let's move into the next part. We're going to talk about and his prison situation. Let's take a closer look. Josh Duggar is getting more time in prison, again. And this is something that seems to keep happening. Because of that, he's going to miss yet another holiday with his family. This is now the third time his release date has been pushed back. And a lot of people were surprised to hear that. But here's the thing. Whatever he's doing in prison, it's clearly not helping him get out early. Now, there's also another layer to this story. Josh Duggar is currently in prison for having child sexual abuse material. And now, his brother, Joseph Duggar, is also in serious trouble. He's been accused of inappropriate behavior involving an underage girl. Reports say, the incident allegedly happened during a family vacation. And when this news broke, people were shocked to see another similar situation connected to the family. There were also reports involving Kendra, and concerns about the children's living conditions. At this point, the children are not in their custody. Now back to Josh. His release date has been pushed back 3 times. One of those times was because he had a cell phone he wasn't allowed to have. And this time, it seems like he may have broken the rules again. A spokesperson explained that they can't comment on individual cases. But they did say, there are many reasons why an inmate's release date can change. Things like earned credits, program participation, or loss of good conduct time due to disciplinary issues. So it's likely, something happened that wasn't allowed. Originally, Josh was expected to be released on December 23, 2032. Now, that date has been pushed to February 2, 2033. So as it stands, it looks like he won't be released until early 2033. And that's a big shift. It also raises questions. If this keeps happening, will his time continue to be extended? And what exactly is going on inside? Right now, there aren't clear answers. What do you think about this situation? Are you surprised that his time was extended again? And do you think this will keep happening? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd really like to hear what you think.